Lesson 3, Chapter 6, and the title of this lesson is Solve Equations with Rational Coefficients. And in this lesson, we go back to our essential question, what does it mean to say that two quantities are equal? Okay, so again, we're dealing with the equations the entire chapter, and when you talk about two quantities being equal, that involves an equal sign, which involve equations. We've solved equations in the first three lessons, and we are going to do the same in this lesson. The two concepts that we will be discussing more or less in this lesson are decimal coefficients and fraction coefficients. Okay, and let's take a look at the real world link. But before we do that, again, we've defined coefficients to be the number before the variable or the numerical factor in a variable expression. So when you have a term with a variable, the number before that will be your coefficient. Just a quick review of what a coefficient is. So let's take a look at the real world link. 3/4 of of the students in Aliyah's class belong to a social network. There are 15 students in her class that belong to a social network. Okay, so let's analyze this problem by first creating a bar diagram and shade 3/4. We know that 3/4 is equal to 0.75 as a decimal. So if we are going to shade 3/4 of this bar diagram, this is what we are shading, 3 out of 4. Okay, it says at the bottom label 15 along the bottom to show the amount of bar that represents the 15 students. Since 3/4 belong to a social network and there are 15 of them, this represents the 15 students that belong to a social network in Aliyah's class. Okay, so based on the diagram, circle the equation that can be used to find C, the number of students in Aliyah's class. Okay, since we know that 3/4 or 0.75 of the class belongs to the social network, which is equal to 15, the most correct answer would be this one, because 0.75C is telling us that 75% of the class is equal to 15. Okay, so based on what you know about solving equations, explain how you could solve equations you circled in exercise 2. Again, using what we learned from the last lesson, since this is a multiplication equation, we use the division property of equality. So we divide, okay, divide both sides of the equation by 0.75. So basically divide this by 0.75, divide that by 0.75, okay, and it will let us answer number 4. How many students in Aliyah's class? We know that 0.75 or 15 divided by 0.75 will give you 20. Okay, so 0.75 or 15 divided by 0.75 will give you 20. So C is equal to 20. There are 20 students in Aliyah's class, in her class. Okay, so let's go to the lesson proper and we'll talk about decimal coefficients. So what is a decimal coefficient? A decimal coefficient is basically when your coefficient is a decimal, okay, divide each side by the coefficient. So all you need to look for is the coefficient. If the coefficient is a decimal, we simply divide it by the coefficient. So let's see how this works in example 1. So we want to solve 16 is equal to 0.25n. Okay, 16 equals to 0.25n. We have 0.25 as our coefficient. So first thing we need to do is copy the problem down. Okay, and then it says here divide each side by the coefficient if the coefficient is a decimal. So using the division property of equality, we divide both sides by 0.25. Okay, we know that 0.25 cancels out and we're left with n is equal to 64. If we get 16 divided by 0.25, that should equal 64. Okay, now this is how it works using long division, of course. If you still remember long division, we simply make our divisor into a whole number by moving the decimal place 2 spaces to the right. Okay, we know that when we look at our fraction, the bottom or the denominator is our divisor, the numerator is our dividend. Okay, and we use long division, and that's how we got 64. Okay, so in this case, the solution is 64. Okay, and if we want to check our answer, we simply have to substitute 64 to our n. So doing that, 16 is it equal to 0.25 times 64? And we know that multiplying using a calculator or manually, 0.25 times 64 is 16. So we have checked our solution. Okay, so the solution therefore is 64. Okay, do the got it problems A, B, and C, and let's see if you understand example number 1. Let's take a look at example number 2. Jaya's coach agreed to buy ice cream for all of the team members. Okay. Ice cream cones are $2.40 each. Write and solve an equation to find how many cones the coach can buy with 30 bucks. Okay. So what do we know? We know that ice cream cones cost $2.40 each. It's asking us to write and solve an equation to find how many cones the coach can buy with $30. Okay, so first let's find out what are we looking for. Okay, we want to find the number of cones, okay, the coach can buy. So we use that to create our let statement or define our variable. So we let n represent the number of cones the coach can buy because that's what we're looking for. Okay, so after doing that, we we write an equation. Since each ice cream cone is $2.40 each, and n represents the number of cones that the coach can buy, we can use the equation 2.4n equals 30 bucks. Okay, because he has $30. So again, this is a multiplication equation, so that means we need to use the division property of equality by dividing both sides by 2.4. Okay, and using our calculator, 30 divided by 2.4, we know that this cancels out. We're left with n. 30 divided by 2.4 is equal to 12.5. Notice there's no such thing as half a cone. So what do? We simply round down. Okay, so by rounding down, since the number of ice cream cones must be a whole number, there is enough money to buy 12 cones only. Okay, you won't be able to buy 13 cones but because he only has 30 bucks, so he can buy 12 cones with change. Do the guided problem letter D, and let's see if I understand example number 2. Okay, let's talk about fraction coefficients this time. So we talked about decimal coefficients, and let's recall that two numbers with a product of 1 are called multiplicative inverses or reciprocals. Okay, so when you talk about multiplicative inverses or reciprocals, two numbers whose product is 1. Okay, if the coefficient in the multiplication equation is a fraction, multiply each side by the reciprocal of the coefficient. Okay, again, let's go back to multiplicative inverses. So when I have 1/2, the multiplicative inverse of 1/2 is 2, or 2 over 1, because the product is 1. If I have 3/4, the multiplicative inverse of 3/4 is 4 over 3, because if I multiply that, the product is 1. That's what it means when it says multiplicative inverses. Okay? In this example right here, solve 3/4 x equals 12 over 20. You notice that you have 3/4 as a coefficient, and it says here in the rule, If the coefficient in a multiplication equation is a fraction, we need to multiply each side by the reciprocal of the coefficient. So first, let's copy the problem down. Write the equation down. 3/4 x equals 12 over 20. We want to know the reciprocal of 3 over 4, which is 4 over 3. Why? Because if I have 3/4 and I multiply that by 4 over 3, the product is 1. So this is the reciprocal of 3/4. So we get that reciprocal and we multiply that to both sides. So we multiply both sides by 4 over 3, 4 over 3. Using our multiplication of fraction skills, okay, we use cross canceling. So the 3 cancels out here, 4 cancels out, you're left with 1, and we've isolated x. Okay, so here again, we multiply 4/3 by 12 over 20. We use cross canceling. That is a 1, that is a 4 because the GCF is 3. The GCF is 4 here, so that is a 1, that is a 5. Okay, so now we'll bring down the x right here, and we'll bring down 4 over 5 down here. Okay, so the answer is x equals 4/5. Okay, now we'll be checking our solution on our own this time so that we can save time in this problem. Okay, so the solution is x equals 4 over 5. Okay, let's take a look at example number 4, negative 7 over 9. Okay, d equals 5. Again, this is our coefficient, negative 7 over 9, and according to what we just learned, we need to multiply each side by the reciprocal of the coefficient. Let me highlight that. Multiply each side by the reciprocal of the coefficient. So we need to find the reciprocal of negative 7 over 9, which is negative 9 over 7. Because if you multiply that, the product will be 1. So this is the reciprocal of negative 7 over 9. So first copy the problem down. Negative 7, 9d equals 5. Then multiply both sides by its reciprocal, which is negative 9 over 7. This one goes away, if you notice. Okay, so you have that. You have a negative times a negative. Okay, and we simply write 5 as 5 over 1. You don't have to, but you can so that you can see how multiplication works in fractions. So this disappears because you cross cancel, that equals to 1. That's the whole idea of multiplying it by its reciprocal. You have negative 9 over 7 times 5 over 1. We know that a negative times a positive is a negative. So now we have negative 45 over 7, or as a mixed number, it's negative 6 and 3 over 7. Okay? Now, if we check our solution here, which it gives us, we simply substitute d with negative 45 over 7. So doing that, we substitute that, and then we know that negative and a negative is a positive, but are they equal to 5? So if we cross cancel, actually we cross cancel our 7s right here, and we now have 45 over 9. 45 over 9 is the same as 5, and we have checked our solution. Okay? In this problem, they just simply multiply that by 7 times 45 is 315, 9 times 7 is 63, but if you divide that, that'll still be equal to 5. My way is easier and it's a lot faster. Do the got it problems E to G, and let's see if you understand example number 3 and 4. And finally, example number 5. Valerie needs 2/3 yard of fabric to make each hat for the school play. Write and solve an equation to find how many hats she can make with 6 yards of fabric. Let's see what we know. First, we know that Valerie needs 2/3 yards of fabric, okay, to make each hat for the school play, okay? And we are being asked to write and solve an equation to find how many hats she can make with 6 yards of fabric. So in this particular example right here, okay, we know, what don't we know, okay? We don't know the number of hats that she has to make. So for us to be able to do that, we need to create a let statement. And basically, we are going to write and solve a multiplication equation here, where n represents the number of hats. Okay, so how do we do that? Again, she needs 2/3 yards of fabric, okay, to make a hat, and our hat is represented by n. So what we can do is we can create an equation that says that 2/3 times n is equal to 6, 6 being the 6 yards of fabric. Again, we get the reciprocal of 2/3 according to our rule, and we multiply it to both sides. The reciprocal of 2/3 is 3/2, so we multiply both sides by 3/2. So this one becomes 1, you're left with n, okay? And if you want to make this into a fraction, 6/1, okay, we can actually cross cancel. That's a 1, that's a 3, okay? And therefore n is equal to 9 because 3 times 3 is 9. So Valerie in this case can make 9 hats. Okay? Do the last word problem and we are done with this lesson. Thank you for watching.